Hey everyone, how's it going? Matthew Kadish here, author of the Earthman Jack Space Saga, coming at you today to tell you like it is with some new entertainment news concerning everyone's favorite showrunners. I put favorite in air fingers quotes here. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. Now, you guys may know these names because they are the executive producers, showrunners, and writers, head writers for Game of Thrones, the iconic HBO fantasy series that set the world on storm and then pretty much upset everybody with its final season. And I have been a vocal critic of Benioff and Weiss pretty much since season 1 of Game of Thrones premiered. Now, the reason for this, full disclosure, is because the Song of Ice and Fire books, which Game of Thrones was based on, are some of my all-time favorite novels. Like, they are the books that just captured my imagination probably more than any other book I've ever read. George R.R. Martin is my favorite author. I've probably read all the Song of Ice and Fire books multiple times, and I just really loved them. And when I heard that it was getting a live-action adaptation, I was really excited to see some of my favorite scenes come to life on screen. And when the show premiered, I basically was flabbergasted by some of the adaptation choices that Benioff and Weiss made, because a lot of them didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it always seemed to me like all the good stuff in the Game of Thrones show came from the novels, and when Benioff and Weiss tried to do their own thing and go off book, so to speak, with their adaptation, the show kind of went off the rails. The writing wasn't as good, the characters weren't as good, the dialogue wasn't as good. So basically, when they didn't have really good source material to draw off of and they were left to their own devices, the show kind of suffered, in my opinion. Now, that's not a very popular opinion because a lot of people really like the show all the way through. But I feel like their defaults as creatives really came to light in the final season of the show, where a lot of people picked up on the fact that these guys aren't exactly as good as they're hyped up to be. Now, in addition to this, D.B. Weiss and David Benioff landed a really interesting contract with Lucasfilm and Disney, in the sense that they were tapped to produce a new trilogy of Star Wars films. And a lot of people celebrated this when it was announced because they were still kind of riding that Game of Thrones high. This was before the final season came out. And people were kind of still upset with Rian Johnson and his take on the material, which with The Last Jedi, which basically divided the fan base and caused a lot of people to lose faith in Kathleen Kennedy's leadership at Lucasfilm. So when they heard Benioff and Weiss were doing a new Star Wars trilogy, a lot of people really celebrated this. I personally did not. I felt like it was another big mistake, because these guys, the hype behind them is one thing, but the reality behind them is something different. Because again, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're very good writers. So I was a little bit concerned when I heard that they'd hitched their wheelhouse to Star Wars. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the implications of this news story that I'm going to share with you are when it comes to Star Wars. Now, with Game of Thrones ending, Benioff and Weiss were with HBO and Warner Media for a good, over a decade, pretty much close to a decade. And that was their home for a long time. And being associated with HBO and Game of Thrones being HBO's biggest show, we kind of expected them to continue doing stuff with HBO, but there were some kerfluffles in there where they had a concept for a new series called Confederate. I believe it was called Confederate, but it was basically an alternate history with what if the South had won the Civil War? What would modern America look like under that? And it was a very controversial TV series in the sense that it kind of explored what modern day slavery would look like, and people were accusing them of racism because of it. And due to that, HBO got cold feet and kind of pulled the plug on the show, and Benioff and Weiss, I think, kind of soured on their relationship with HBO, and they started shopping themselves out to other studios. Now, this shopping process probably would have happened anyway. But what I want to do now is I want to take you on to this announcement that is kind of important here. So this is from Deadline, and basically Benioff and Weiss have found a new home outside of HBO, which is basically Netflix. Now, what happened here was Benioff and Weiss were basically shopping around what's known as an overall deal to a bunch of different studios. I believe that they were shopping it around to HBO, Warner Media, Disney, Amazon, all these things. There was a lot of rumors flying around about them possibly moving to Amazon and taking over the Lord of the Rings show that they got going on over there. Luckily, that did not happen. But for those of you who maybe don't know what an overall deal means, is basically it's a deal where the studio gets the first crack at a creative's ideas, basically. And if the studio decides that they don't like the idea, they don't want to go forward with it, that creative cannot shop that idea elsewhere. It's exclusive to that studio. And typically this is a TV deal, but in more recent times, they've been packaging in movies and TV with exclusive overall deals. The most recent example of this is J.J. Abrams and his overall deal with Warner Media, where him and Bad Robot basically signed a $500 million deal where Bad Robot will be producing TV and movies exclusively for Warner Media. And under the overall deal, basically J.J. Abrams can't take stuff from Bad Robot and pitch it to other movie studios. Warner Media has the right of first refusal, and if they don't like it, it's basically dead in the water because under the agreement, Bad Robot can't take that anywhere else. And it's very similar here, where Benioff and Weiss were shopping around an overall deal for film and TV, and they landed it at Netflix. So it's an exclusive overall deal with Netflix for film and TV, I should say movies and TV shows. And so Benioff and Weiss are going to be exclusive with Netflix going forward, outside of the deals that they signed before the overall deal happened. So they're still doing Star Wars for Lucasfilm and Disney, but everything new that they do is going to be exclusive to Netflix. And if Netflix doesn't like one of their ideas, guess what? They can't shop it anywhere else. They can't take it over to Hulu or Disney or Warner's or HBO or whatever. It dies at Netflix. So they basically just have to shelf it if Netflix doesn't want to go through with it. But everything else that gets made is made under the Netflix banner. Netflix is going to foot the bill for it and air it on their network. So just going to go through this article at Deadline right here. Netflix wins overall film TV deal for Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. Emmy Award-winning Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss have found a new home nearly 3 months after Deadline revealed that Benioff and Weiss were being courted by 6 studios for an overall global deal to write, produce, and direct new series and films. We can reveal that they have signed an exclusive deal with Netflix. Nobody was confirming numbers, but sources tell Deadline the deal is in the 9-figure range like some of the other mega deals signed by show creators like Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy, each of whom have also moved to Netflix. The deal for Benioff and Weiss, which we hear is for 5 years and is worth as much as $300 million, was brokered by their longtime attorney at Hansen Jacobson Teller. Now, initial reports were that this deal was in the 9-figure range. I assumed that it was kind of similar to the deal J.J. Abrams got at Warner's, which was for $500 million. And it looks like their deal at Netflix was for $300 million. Now, what this means is that for 5 years, Netflix has exclusive rights to all their ideas, all their development stuff. So they're working exclusively for Netflix for 5 years guaranteed. And over that 5 years, they basically have $300 million to play with. So every TV show, every movie, all that stuff comes out of that $300 million pot. As I understand it, there might be some finer points in there, but basically Netflix just gave Benioff and Weiss $300 million to do whatever the heck they want for the next 5 years. So, if they're going to be doing Game of Thrones episode budgets, they're probably going to tear through that $300 million really fast. But regardless, 9 figures, $300 million, 5 years at Netflix is what their overall deal boiled down to. When Deadline revealed that Benioff and Weiss were meeting on the overall deal at a time when Game of Thrones was wrapping up its final season of the drama, the duo had met with Netflix as well as HBO, Warner Media, Disney, Comcast, Amazon, and Apple. By late last month, the field had narrowed to Netflix, Amazon, and Disney FX network on that one. Benioff and Weiss spent the last decade at HBO fully focused on the groundbreaking series based on the George R.R. Martin novels. Said Netflix confirmed to Deadline that it had won the deal. Said Netflix Chief Content Officer Ted Sarandos, "We are thrilled to welcome master storytellers." Ooh, I don't know about that. "We are thrilled to welcome storytellers David Benioff and Dan Weiss to Netflix. They are a creative force and have delighted audiences worldwide with their epic storytelling. We can't wait to see what their imaginations will bring to our members." Said David Benioff and Dan Weiss, "We had a beautiful run with HBO for more than a decade, and we're grateful to everyone there for always making us feel at home. Over the past few months, we've spent many hours talking to Cindy Holland and Peter Friedlander, as well as Ted Sarandos and Scott Stuber. We remember the same shots from the same 80s movies. We love the same books. We're excited about the same storytelling possibilities. Netflix has built something astounding and unprecedented, and we're honored they invited us to join them. They have several obligations they intend to fulfill. They are creating, writing, and producing one of the next Star Wars trilogies." And this is interesting. Rian Johnson is doing his own with others in the works. So Rian Johnson's trilogy is still confirmed to be going on, guys, at least by Deadline. I've been saying this for a while now. Rian Johnson's trilogy is not canceled. It's still going through, and it's probably going to happen sometime after Benioff and Weiss have completed their trilogy. They wrote for Universal a Kurt Cobain project and are poised to adapt the Prison Break tale Dirty White Boys for Fox/Disney. So they still got a couple irons in the fire here where, they're working on other projects at other studios, but which were put into place before their Netflix overall deal went into effect. A priority will be to hatch another water cooler series, this time for Netflix. Game of Thrones won the Primetime Emmy for Best Drama. The last 3 years, the show was eligible. For the rare drama series that went against binging release strategy of streaming rivals. Now they are on the other side of that, looking to capture the zeitgeist, as many Netflix series have done. So this is kind of Netflix's big investment into the forthcoming streaming wars. Now, if you've followed my channel for any period of time, you'll know that now is a really exciting time to cover entertainment news, especially in Hollywood, because there's a big disruption going on in the industry with many major studios getting ready to launch their direct-to-consumer streaming services, moving them away from broadcast TV and cable and more with direct-to-consumer stuff. And a big part of these, streaming platforms is, in order to attract people to them and retain them as subscribers, you need to produce a lot of really good original content, and you need to produce it quickly and regularly. And so what's been happening is Disney has really been ramping up their content offerings and also looking to undercut all the other competitors in the streaming space, but with lower prices. And they've taken aim directly at Netflix as the leader of the streaming services right now. And what's been happening is that all the major studios in preparation to launch their own streaming services have been pulling content that they've licensed to Netflix away from that service so they can put it on their own streaming platforms. And Netflix has been losing a lot of the content that they relied upon to keep people subscribed. And so in order to combat that, not only is Netflix acquiring a lot more European content, TV shows and movies from overseas, but they're also trying to ramp up their original content. And their hiring of Benioff and Weiss is kind of a response to all the content Disney's going to be creating. And it's kind of a reflection of what happened over at Warner Media when they signed their overall deal with J.J. Abrams. So Warner's is going all in with J.J. Abrams to help produce content for their upcoming HBO Max service. Disney has Marvel Star Wars, Pixar, their animation studios, all this stuff creating content for Disney Plus and Hulu. And in addition to that, all the Fox properties and things of that nature are going to be ramping up into high gear to fill the content for some of the streaming services. And Netflix is betting on Benioff and Weiss to be their guys to really create some great content. And you can see here where it says, a priority will be to hatch another water cooler series, a series that, generates a lot of buzz, that a lot of people are talking about, and will attract subscribers to the Netflix platform. Now, here's the issue, and this is the real problem. The problem here is that Benioff and Weiss are idiots. I'm sorry to sound negative. I'm sorry to be insulting to them, but these guys are not smart. They may be decent producers in the sense that they were able to logistically create, a epic fantasy series on HBO. But if you kind of followed the behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on with that show, and a really great channel to check out is A Dragon Demands, who really covers this stuff extensively. He's someone who does these really in-depth video essays on the show, but also Benioff and Weiss and their mismanagement of the show. It was kind of like one of those things where they succeeded despite their best efforts. And a lot of their success is really because they had such great source material to work with. All the best stuff that people loved about the HBO show was stuff that Benioff and Weiss pulled from George R.R. Martin. So the things that people loved about Game of Thrones were from the original creator of Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, his plot twist, his characters, his dialogue, all that stuff came from him. And Benioff and Weiss just kind of copied and pasted from the page to the screen. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, Benioff and Weiss, once they started doing their own original stuff, it started going way off the rails. And if you watch Dragon Demand's channel, he goes into why this is. And Benioff and Weiss are not the super producers people think they are. They had a really great team of people who were out there working their butts off to deliver these great episodes of television. But the decline started once they ran out of book material to pull from, and it culminated in a final season, which was just a complete mess and actually exposed them for the hack frauds that they are. And I'm sorry to use that type of language, but I need to call things out as I see them. And I have never liked Benioff and Weiss as writers, as creatives. And I feel like they've gotten a lot of unjustified praise that should have been directed at George R.R. Martin as opposed to them. Because everything I've seen from them in terms of original content has not been good. And this is a consistent pattern. And I think what we're going to be seeing once they start doing their stuff at Netflix is that we're going to be getting 100% pure Benioff and Weiss, and it's going to be very lackluster. It's going to be bad. Unless that they pull another Game of Thrones in the sense that they find really good source material to crib from, that'll kind of overshadow their deficiencies as creative heads. Now, that being said, technically they seem to have some chops on them. They're good at producing stuff. They've directed a few episodes of Game of Thrones, which was decent enough. But these guys, they don't understand storytelling. They don't understand writing. Their ideas are typically very bad. And when they get them on screen, they end up being very, very much worse. So I think Netflix basically jumped the shark here. They made a mistake hiring these guys and betting the future of their streaming wars on them, because Benioff and Weiss are going to disappoint. Now, that being said, how does this affect their other projects? Particularly Star Wars, because that's the thing everyone cares about. I know that's the thing I care about. I really want to see Star Wars rebound. I want it to be good again. I want Star Wars to be event films again. I want to see like lines a week ahead of the premiere going around the block because people just love Star Wars once more. And I want it to recover from the mess that Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy have made of it. But these guys are not the guys to do it, but they're the guys that we're stuck with. And what a lot of people are wondering is, how is their deal at Netflix going to affect Star Wars? Now, obviously, they're signed on for 3 films, and they have to complete these films while they're developing stuff at Netflix. Now, these guys, when you're in development, you're able to have lots of irons in the fire. You're able to kind of get a lot of projects off the ground while you're focused on other stuff. People do that in Hollywood all the time. It's standard operating procedure over there. And so I don't think that it's going to detract from their focus on Star Wars for the most part. Now, obviously, they know Star Wars is a big deal. They've probably got some type of profit participation on it. So they're definitely going to put some time, effort, and energy into creating the best trilogy that they possibly can create for Star Wars. The question here is that unlike Rian Johnson, who was the writer and the director of The Last Jedi, Benioff and Weiss probably won't be directing the Star Wars trilogy. They will be producing it, which basically means they're going to be taking over the workload that Kathleen Kennedy usually shoulders, and they're going to be the ones handling the day-to-day. That being said, they're also probably going to be the ones to write the trilogy. And that's where the problem comes in, because they're terrible writers. They just are. I'm sorry if you disagree with me, but in my opinion, they're awful, awful writers if they don't have stuff to pull from. Now, if they go to the expanded Star Wars universe and take a novel and just steal shamelessly from that, then there's the possibility that their trilogy could be good. But if they're coming up with it off the top of their heads, all 100% original content, my guess is that we're going to get something along the same lines of quality of X-Men Wolverine, which David Benioff actually wrote. So basically, what it comes down to is that these guys are going to probably sit down, write the scripts if they haven't already. They're going to write 3 scripts, and then they're going to start producing it. And they're going to hire directors to handle this trilogy. And while they're overseeing the production of this trilogy, they're going to be developing stuff over at Netflix in terms of movies and TV shows and all that stuff. And they're going to be hiring writers, and they're going to be, overseeing stuff, or they're going to be writing stuff themselves. So that's going to be going on as Star Wars gets ramped up and ready to be shot and produced and all that good stuff. So basically, we're going to be getting 3 Star Wars movies from these guys, but the level of quality is still up in the air because, honestly, they are not, of the pedigree I feel Star Wars needs in order to recover from the missteps that they've been making up to this point. I don't think Episode 9 is going to be all that good. I don't think it will be bad. I think JJ will come in and do a passable job with it, but if any fraction of the rumors of the plot leaks that I've seen are true, fans are going to be massively disappointed with Episode 9, and it's not going to do anything to fix the rift in the fandom that Episode 8 created. And Benioff and Weiss are not going to be the saviors of the franchise going forward. So Netflix probably overpaid for these guys, and Star Wars is definitely going to be written and produced by them. Probably not directed. They'll probably bring in other directors to handle that. But yeah, this is not necessarily good news because honestly, I really don't think these guys should continue to work in the business in terms of being writers necessarily. But if they wanted to be producers or directors or what have you, yeah, okay. They've got some chops in those categories. But in terms of storytelling, these guys are some of the worst that you're probably ever going to see in terms of Hollywood. And this is one of those situations of rewarding failure. You know what I mean? So I'm not too excited about this news. I mean, I'm glad that they didn't end up at Amazon. But Netflix, I think, might have kind of made a mistake hiring them, especially now that they require so much content for these upcoming streaming wars. And I'm going to be keeping a close look on how this stuff develops. I'm going to be keeping an eye on what they're doing, not only at Netflix, but also at Lucasfilm. And we'll see how it goes. I hope they surprise me, honestly. I hope that these guys, knock it out of the park with Star Wars. I hope they make something good, and I hope that their deal at Netflix gives us a lot of good TV shows and movies to enjoy. But honestly, I just don't see it at this point. Netflix probably would have been better off spending that $300 million on George R.R. Martin to come over and develop series with them and movies and stuff like that, because George R.R. Martin is the guy who was behind the brilliance of Game of Thrones. And so if Netflix wanted that true creativity, they should have just hired him. But of course, he's busy working on The Winds of Winter for the next 20 years. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, guys, what do you think of this news? Are you excited that Benioff and Weiss are going to be the head creative team driving the new content at Netflix? How do you think this deal is going to affect their Star Wars trilogy? Let me know in the comments. And as always, subscribe to this channel for more movie, TV, and entertainment news and analysis. This is Matthew Kadish, and I will catch you in the next video.